You knew this was coming. I knew this was coming. Let's just drop the pretenses and do it. Bibliophiles of the internet, my name is Audrey, and today I'm here to give you 5 reasons to read Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. If you have not yet memorized my pitch for this book, it's an Own Voices queer Latinx paranormal romance about Yadriel, who is trans and hoping to prove to his family and Brujex community that he is a real brujo, but because he's trans, they're not fully convinced the traditional rites of passage will work in his case. Determined to prove them wrong, he goes through the ceremony on his own and decides the best way to prove himself is to summon the spirit of his recently deceased primo, but instead he accidentally summons Julian Diaz, a boy from his school with a horrible reputation, and now Julian fully intends to drag Yadriel all the way into his unfinished business. Content warnings for gender dysphoria, misgendering, allusions to dead naming, which is off the page, references to blood magic for rituals, some brief descriptions of self-harm, again for ritualistic purposes, some violence, allusions to child homelessness, parental abandonment, and exploration of parental loss. This is like the greatest challenge of my reviewing life because I could give you 100 solid reasons to read this book. I could genuinely talk about it for hours, and in fact I probably already have if you just compile all the internet content I've made about this book, all the DMs I've sent, all the voice memos I've jettisoned off into the universe. I have thoughts, I have points to make. I know my relationship with this book has kind of become a running joke, but I'm gonna try and talk about it sincerely, which is very hard for me because as a queer, trans, non-binary Latinx person myself, I see so much of myself in it and I'm very close to it, but I'm gonna try my best, so let's jump on in. Reason number 1 to read Cemetery Boys is because it's a masterclass in exploring Latinx family dynamics. This was one of the first things that stood out to me about Cemetery Boys, whether it's the casual inclusion of multi-generational households, the staunch traditionalism and machismo that seems to run through Latinx families, or even the way Latinx communities in so many ways are not equipped to understand transness and queerness. That last one is huge, especially when it comes to language itself. Not only do many Latinx families lack the vocabulary to address and understand queerness in English, but Spanish speakers have another hurdle to jump because Spanish is an arbitrarily gendered language and it can be innocuously insidious. That dissonance of Yadriel's family wanting to understand him and respect him, but not always knowing how to do that and sometimes falling back on old habits because that's easier for them, really rang extremely true to my own experience. And there's also a lot of nuance there because the level of acceptance is not the same across the board. Yadriel's father, for example, struggles to understand him while his mom was much more open and supportive. His abuela says she'll always see him as her little girl while his brother is kind of indifferent. He's feeling all these different levels of understanding at once. It just really goes to show that there is so much emotional work trans Latinx folks have to take on in order to educate those around us. And it's really important to see Yadriel surrounded by a family and a community that doesn't reject him outright, that still loves him, but still others him and just doesn't know what to do with him because, again, I think that's an incredibly realistic experience. Reason number 2 is a big one, so stick with me. It's the pitch-perfect emotional dynamic and exchange between Yadriel and Julian. Like I mentioned, Yadriel is constantly navigating all these different levels of acceptance from his friends, his family, at school, at home, at Brujex gatherings. It's exhausting and it's endless. That's not to say he doesn't have people in his life who anchor him and support him. He has his ride or die Maritza and his Tío Catriz who are very accepting and affirming, but there's still barriers to them fully understanding his experience. Julian Diaz kind of blows him from nowhere and completely takes Yads by surprise because he's extremely energetic, very easily distracted, has absolutely no brain to mouth filter, and all his life he's basically been written off as this mindless troublemaker who is considered to be expendable in so many ways. At first, Yadriel definitely judges him to be someone who is not smart, who doesn't get it, doesn't care, when Julian is in fact the most caring, most insightful person to ever exist. He notices so much more than people give him credit for, and he has this rare ability to see situations for exactly what they are within seconds. And Yadriel's whole gender complex and family struggle is no exception. Julian instantly understands it. For Yadriel to come face to face with someone who gets what he's going through without him having to explain it is such a rare and beautiful experience. Julian is the one who challenges Yadriel on why he feels the need to prove his gender, asking him what he's really trying to prove and for whose benefit. He's the one making Yadriel realize that he's internalized all these ideas about gender and masculinity that are making him feel like he's not enough when he is. When I describe the relationship between Yadriel and Julian, I describe describe them as holding up a mirror to each other, seeing straight into the heart of the other person and showing them who they truly are when you strip away everything else. Julian is there to show Yadriel that he is a brujo, he is enough just the way he is, and Yadriel is there to show Julian he is a good person, he's important, and his impact on the people around him is profoundly felt. Like I said in my reading vlog, they have a very reciprocal relationship, and I use the phrase emotional exchange intentionally because they're both contributing things to each other's lives. It's not a purely transactional relationship, even though it may start off that way, and because Julian is a spirit with limitations, everything about their relationship is deliberate, carefully considered, and everything they do, everything they share comes with such intent and consciousness. It's one of those relationships where both characters make each other stronger, make each other better, but there's also a soft familiarity between them, and they're able to make each other laugh and feel safe, which is really great. And overall, their dynamic is just fantastic. Reason number 3 is that Cemetery Boys presents us with an affirming magic system. While Yadriel struggles with feeling that he needs to prove himself to his family and his community, that is something he's warring with internally. One of the only entities he doesn't have to convince or win over or even earn is the actual magic. Obviously, he cycles through a lot of self-doubt, which is totally valid, but the magic is his and it always was his. Lady Death has always seen him for exactly who he is. I think it's really fascinating to have this magic system that seems inherently gendered and binary on the surface, like men are brujos, women are brujas, brujos help spirits pass to the afterlife, while brujas have healing magic, both of which are abilities that seem to play into traditional gender roles. And there's definitely an idea perpetuated within the community that you're born with a certain kind of magic and that cannot change, which obviously we know does not work perhaps the way they think it does, and that's not even a spoiler because Yadriel has to possess summoning magic to summon a spirit. Like I said before, traditionalism runs very deep in Latinx communities, and it can almost become weaponized as a defense mechanism within our community as an excuse to let those beliefs and traditions lie because that's just the way it is. That same idea is projected onto the way the Brujex community views and understands magic, and Yadriel's existence as a trans boy, as a brujo, is a challenge to that very system, and that possibility is something that we really do need to see. That, to me, is so incredibly powerful because it affirms Yadriel and shows that he knows exactly who he is exactly who he says he is. It's those around him who are slow to understand because obtaining the magic is not an obstacle for him. It's not something holding him back. It is his. He does not have to fight for it. He has other, bigger issues within himself that he has to confront and work through over the course of the book. Lady Death truly says trans rights, and I also appreciate the open-endedness of it because if magic is not determined by gender or birthright or any other arbitrary marker, that means there's so much more room for so many more kinds of magic to exist. Reason number 4 is that the story deftly explores transness without ever presenting itself as being about the trans experience. This is such a fine line to walk, especially when a story is like the first of its kind, and there will definitely still be misguided readers who go into this wanting to learn more about the trans experience or who walk away claiming they learned so much when Cemetery Boys is very much not about that. I love how both visible transness and subtle transness are both on the page in the story because it's validating to trans readers, which is the entire point. It's saying, yes, Yadriel also gets stuck in his binder after a shower. He also struggles to find button-down shirts that fit his upper body. He also has to deal with his family calling him the wrong name sometimes. But hey, he's also so much more than that. It's a story that acknowledges how consciously Yadriel has to navigate the world and constantly be aware of what's happening around him and how it might affect him, but it's not his endgame. It's not even the most interesting part of his story. I think you go into the story expecting Yadriel, quote-unquote, proving his gender to his family as being the natural climax of the story, as being the thing Yadriel is working towards the most, and I'm not going to give anything away, but it's actually wicked not. There's other more pressing things happening in the story. They're trying to figure out what happened to his cousin. He's trying to find a way to help Julian. It's also getting close to Dia de Muertos, which is a very big deal for the Brujex community. His gender and his gender expression is something that impacts him, yes, but he actually has bigger problems. I love that you're conscious of his transness and you can track it in so many different ways, but it is not the core of who he is. That simple truth gives his character so much more depth, and I really appreciate that. I did want to briefly touch on how the story brilliantly reflects subtle transness. Especially in the beginning, there's a definite sense of Yadriel's isolation and loneliness. He's going through this rite of passage by himself when he should be surrounded by family. He doesn't know when is the right time to share this news about his magic, which is why he keeps it secret. And then he definitely doesn't want people to find out about Julian because to him, it's glaring evidence of his quote-unquote mistake. As a trans person myself, that hit really hard because when you are trans, you might go through big changes or even small milestones by yourself because it may not be safe for you to share that with other folks. It could be something like you asking a friend in confidence to try your new name so that you hear how it sounds, or getting a new binder for the first time and trying it on in your bathroom alone, and then the quiet panic you feel when you can't get out of it, or maybe even transitioning or changing your presentation in some way that feels good to you but that maybe other people don't notice. When you are trans, you so often do things alone and go through things alone when it shouldn't be that way, and you get to see Yadriel go from that place of feeling small and alone to being surrounded by validation and affirmation from the people who know him best. So I appreciate that part of Yadriel's journey is going through that isolation and trying to get to a place where he can finally step into his own light. And if he does, it won't be because he's trans. It'll be because he's great. Which leads me to reason number 5. This book shows us a trans hero who is resilient and powerful, but most importantly, joyous. Yadriel is an incredible hero to carry this story because he doubts himself, because he is so unable to see his own potential and his own greatness, because he is flawed, but that doesn't stop him from doing great things. He constantly feels like he's inconveniencing people, messing things up, making mistakes, and yet he continues going forward. And yes, that is in part because of his friends bolstering him and lending him their strength when he needs it, but there's also a wealth of strength within himself that he's still learning how to access. And to me, he's powerful because he's a full person. Aiden allows Yadriel to have agency, to be unsure of himself, to be angry and hurt when he's going through shit, to be selfish, to not forgive people when they fail to acknowledge who he is in some way, but also to be loving and caring and thoughtful, which takes just as much resilience. And when I say that he's powerful, I don't just mean the magic he literally possesses. Having people who love him makes him powerful. Having people who see him makes him powerful. Having people who want to be a part of his story makes him powerful. And he is powerful because he knows exactly who he is, even if he's still trying to figure out his place. He is powerful, yes, in part because he's trans and he exists, but he is also powerful because he's willing to give himself a chance at being happy and to fight for that chance. The one thing I always say about this book is that it deals with death and loss and trauma and trans pain, but it is not defined by those things. When you share space with this story, you will laugh, you will have fun, you will get to follow Yadriel on this whirlwind adventure, you will fall in love with these characters falling in love because it is a story that values euphoria and joy over everything else. Cemetery Boys is a book that will make you smile, a book that will make you feel, and a book that will make you hope and realize that Yadriel deserves joy just like anybody else, simply because he exists. Again, those are just 5 reasons among approximately 10,000 good reasons to read this book. Keep in mind, I didn't even get to talk about how beautifully Dia de Muertos is reflected in the magic system, the incredibly diverse Latinx Brujex community, all the Latinx Easter eggs, how the story celebrates good allyship and found family. I didn't get to talk about the brilliant foil characters, emotional parallels, nothing like that. Simply put, in what may be the greatest understatement of my life, I love this book and I highly recommend it. So if you have read Cemetery Boys, or if you plan to, definitely meet me down below in the comments and let me know what you think. But that's everything I had for this review and recommendation today. Until next time, educate yourself, be kind to yourself, take care of yourself, and I will catch you on the flip side of the page.